Hello and welcome back to another video. This is Jennifer McGuire. Today I thought I would show you a fun way to make a window scene card. So basically from the front of the card you have a window that shows a scene in the inside. Even better, these cards are trifold, so there's plenty of room to write your sentiment on the inside. So here's an example where you can see the window on the front, and when you open it up there's a scene on the inside, and then you can open it again for your personal message. I have a few variations to show you, and I will demonstrate that you can create windows out of any large dies that you may have, and you can even create your own that look like windows using square dies. So I'll walk you through each of these examples. Now, on all of my cards today, I'm using some new products from Hero Arts, including their new Heroscapes stamp sets. I think these are really creative because they are layering stamp sets that create a field of flowers, so you can create a beautiful scene very easily. I will be demonstrating this one first. This is the Sunflower Heroscapes stamp set, and there are coordinating dies for this too. Next, there is the Tulips Heroscapes stamp set, and this creates a field of tulips along with some other little images that will team up nicely with it. And last but not least, we have the Lavender Field Heroscapes stamp set. By the way, these are large 6x8 stamp sets, and it creates a field scene that is 4¼ inches wide, so it's perfect for a vertical note card. And of course, this has some lovely sentiments and other images that go nicely with it. Let's start by doing all of our stamping of our scenes. This is the Misty stamping tool, and I thought I'd use this since I'm making multiple scenes at once. I'm using a Misty Creative Corner, which is this triangle piece, to make sure I have my image straight. This is the first image in the layering set for the sunflower field. Notice I'm doing this in the middle of a piece of white cardstock. That is because I originally thought I would trim out my entire scene from this, so I needed plenty of room, but I did change my mind, so I end up with some leftover white cardstock that I can use in the future. I'm starting my first layer of stamping with Hero Arts Green Hills Shadow Ink. Any ink would work for this. I just happen to like the colors of the Hero Arts because I've been using them for years. Whenever I'm doing layering stamping, I like to heat set the ink before I move on to the next layer, just to keep my images nice and crisp as we layer up the inks. And as you saw, I'm doing 4 of these at once. Because I have the stamps out and I have it set up, I might as well do multiples so I can make many cards. For the second layer, I'm using Fresh Lawn ink from Hero Arts, and that's a little bit darker, and you can see how we're already creating our scene. Very easy to do. Wanted the contrast to be a little bit more, so I decided to double stamp that. And I'll do this on each of our panels and then again heat set them just to kind of freeze the ink and keep it from blending too much. I want it to stay crisp. Now here's a bonus step. You don't have to do this, but I wanted to add some darker green towards the bottom of this image. So I have the same stamp in there, and I'm using an inking tool to apply some dark Forever Green ink just to the bottom of the image. And then I'm stamping that right on top of what we've done. This makes for a little bit of darker color along the bottom. You don't have to do this step, but I really feel like it adds a lot to it and gives it some depth. Now it's time to stamp our flowers. This is very easy to line up because I'm lining up the image with those open white spaces. So for this, I'm going to stamp with a light yellow. This is Soft Vanilla from Hero Arts. And I actually decided to double stamp that one also because it was a little bit too light. I felt like I wanted my flowers to be a little more bold. And you can see how this yellow ink just fits into those white openings. Perfect fit, makes it easy to create the scene very quickly. After I've done the same on all of my panels, it's time to come in with the next layer of flowers, which I stamped with Butter Bar ink. And then after I've done that on all of them, I'll heat set it. And then it's time for our final layer, and that is the center of the flowers. This one I decided to stamp with a dark brown that's called Cup of Joe from Hero Arts. By the way, you can use any inks that you want to do this stamp layering. Just grab the colors that appeal to you or you think would work best for the scene. Next, let's briefly go through the stamping of the Tulip field. So this is the other stamp set. I already stamped the first layer of green with the Green Hills ink from Hero Arts. Now I'm lining up the first layer of tulips. This one I'm going to stamp with Fresh Peach, which is one of my favorite HeroArts colors. One of the ways to let your inks dry between layers is to switch between the grass and the flowers. So here I did the first layer of green grass. Then I'll do the first layer of peach flowers. Then I'll go back and do the second layer of green grass and then the second layer of peach flowers. And that way I don't have to dry them in between. Okay, so now I'm going back to the second layer of the grass, and this is again the Fresh Lawn ink. For all of my green stamping today, I used the Green Hills and the Fresh Lawn from HeroArts. Now, I also did a little bit of the Forever Green along the bottom using the inking tool. Now I've lined up the second layer of the tulips, and this is Pale Tomato, which is a great soft red. So you can see how I'm quickly able to build up the layers of the tulip field to create that perfect scene. And then finally, we have the lavender fields. I'll go through this one very quickly. I first did the Green Hills for the first layer of the green. And then for the first layer of the purple, I used soft purple ink from HeroArts. Then I went in and added the Fresh Lawn for the second layer of the green. And then for the second layer of the purple, I used the soft purple ink. You could also use like a grape color if you want, but I wanted a softer look with this layered image. Now that we have all of our floral fields stamped, and I have a bunch of them, it's time to make some cards. Let's start with this first example with one of the sunflower field images. On this one, we have a wood grain oval frame and some acetate across it, which when you open up, you can see the full scene inside. And then you can open it up again and have a message on the inside of that. For this, I'm using the HeroArts Nesting Oval Wood Frame dies. You could use any frame die that you have here, but I thought that the wood grain feel of this would be perfect for like a window frame on the front of a card. So I die cut this twice from white cardstock, very easy to do, and it engraves that wood grain pattern into it. I also have a 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inch white top folding note card. I'm centering one of my ovals right on the front of my note card, and I will trace the center onto the note card. This will allow me to know where to cut a window in the front of our note card. Now the nice thing is, this window doesn't have to be perfect by any means because it will be hidden. I'm just going to use my scissors to cut just outside of that pen line that I did. So I'm going to just have a rough cut oval there. Now on the back of one of my ovals, I'm putting some strong double-sided tape from Lawn Fawn. And then I'll put this onto a piece of HeroArts acetate. HeroArts has acetate in many different shapes and sizes. I grabbed one of their acetate tags, a clear tag, because I have a lot of them on hand from long ago. But you could use any recycled piece of clear material here. Once I have the frame glued to it, I can go ahead and trim the extra acetate from around the frame. Once again, I'm going to put some strong double-sided tape on the back of the frame. Then we can glue that onto the front of our card, lining up with that oval opening that we cut. So now we have a window with kind of like a glass piece across it. Now to hide our inside, because I just did a jagged cut for that oval, I'm going to take the other die cut oval that we created and glue that one on the inside, lining it up with the one that's showing on the front. So now this looks pretty from the inside and the out. Okay, next I have my first sunflower field that I created. I originally was going to cut a panel from this, but decided to use the coordinating die to cut the field out, so I could just easily arrange a scene. I also stamped a little barn in the soft brown HeroArts ink and a couple of fence images using soft granite from HeroArts. And again, I'll use the coordinating dies to cut those out. Now we have the pieces ready to assemble our scene. For the inside of our card, we need another 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inch note card, but this time we're going to work on it upside down, and it'll adhere to our window card. You'll see in a moment. So on this panel, I'm applying some blue ink towards the top to create a sky. I'm using my Pink and Main Ergonomic blending brush because it's really easy to cover a large background with that. I'm also using Hero Art's Reactive inks just because I like the colors. I'm using Splash first and applying a light amount of color, but making it heavier towards that top edge and then blending it down. Now, you could use any inks or any ink blending brush for this. I just happen to like this color, so I chose it. Now, it ended up being a little bit too soft, so I decided to come in with a darker blue and apply that just to the top, and that is the Blue Hawaii color. If you have distress inks, that would work great for this process too. Now, underneath that sky, I am adhering our little sunflower field and leaving a little bit of white at the bottom of that. I then can glue any other little images that I want on the scene. You could go to town with it, but I decided to keep mine simple and only add the little barn. And then I decided instead of using my fence die cuts, I'll end up stamping them later directly onto the panel. Okay, so we need some clouds here. Now, I used clouds from a few of the different Heroscape stamp sets that I showed you earlier, and I'm lining them up in my Misty. Now, for this, I decided to use Hero Art's white dye ink. This is different than the pigment ink. This ink absorbs into the paper and is very subtle, so you need to stamp this 3 or 4 times for it to show up. If you want a more intense white look, you want to use white pigment ink. But I wanted a soft look that kind of blends and just looks a little velvety on the background, and this was the perfect touch. I really like that white dye ink. Now it's time to create the sentiment that goes on the front of our window, this nice Thinking of You die cut. I thought it would be easiest if the bottom layer of my Thinking of You die cut was covered with an adhesive so it would glue nicely onto the window. Here I'm covering a white cardstock with a layer of Stick-It double-sided adhesive. This is a very thin adhesive that die cuts beautifully. So now I have a piece of white cardstock with the adhesive on the back of it. Once I trim off the excess, I just like to take my bone folder and press it firmly so that the adhesive is stuck nicely to the cardstock. Now I'll run this through my die cut machine using the Hero Art's Thinking of You die. And I'll end up with a white die cut with the adhesive already on the back. It's like a sticker. I also use the same Thinking of You die, and I cut it from some gold cardstock. And I cut it from another piece of white cardstock without any adhesive on it. On the back of the gold cardstock die cut, I'm putting some liquid adhesive from Gina K, and I'll glue it onto the regular white die cut. Then I will glue that stacked die cut onto our sticker die cut that we created. So basically what I'm creating is a stacked Thinking of You die cut where the top layer is gold and the bottom layer has adhesive on the back that will glue nicely onto our window. And by the way, over on the side there, you can see the Thinking of You stamp and die cut set that I used to create this die cut. And it's a new one from Hero Arts. Okay, so once I have these layers glued together, we can peel off the sticker on the back of this and lay it right onto the window of our card, and it'll adhere nicely to the acetate and to the note card. The nice thing about Stick-It double-sided adhesive is you can press it down and then lift it up and move it until you have it just right. It won't stay stuck until you really press it in place. I like to use a bone folder to make sure that it's really stuck there and won't come undone. So now that I'm happy with where it is, I can just rub across it with the bone folder and it'll stay put. Now it's time to glue our trifold card together. So on the inside of our upside down scene card, I'm putting some adhesive. Any strong adhesive would work here. And then I will slide my 2 cards together. So you can see how they slide right together. I'll press those background panels in place, and then we can fold our card up and we have a very easy to create trifold card. On the front, we have the Thinking of You window, and on the inside, we have our scene. I decided to add some little birds to our scene. You could add anything here that you want. There are many images that come in the sets that you could use. I wanted to keep my simple, so I just used wet cement ink to stamp our little birds. And I did go back and add a little bit of detail to some of my stamping with Copic markers. I just find that you can add little details of depth to make your images a little more bold or to stand out more. So I added a little bit of gray to the birds, and I added a little bit of dark brown to the center of our flowers. And by the way, you could use absolutely any markers or pencils to do this. One last thing for this card is I did stamp a little message on the envelope. This is the Hero Arts All My Heart stamp set, which has a large background image and lots of tiny little sentiments. This actually teams up with a peekaboo die that Hero Arts has that creates a bunch of little windows that open and you can have little messages under them. But I thought these messages were also great to stamp on my matching envelope, so I decided to use that throughout today's video. Let's take a look at the completed card. You can see our dimensional Thinking of You gold die cut on the front with the acetate window. And on the inside, we have that scene. On the front of the card, just part of the scene peeks through, which I think leads to a nice surprise on the inside. You could totally skip the acetate piece on this, but I think most of us have some clear packaging that we could recycle to create that window. I found these Hero Arts floral field stamps perfect for creating the scene, but you could create any kind of scene you want using little critters or maybe an ocean or some stencils. And remember, this card does open up again for plenty of room for a personal message on the inside. Okay, let's create another window scene card design. In this case, I used a fancier window die for the front, which again allows a simple scene to show through on the inside. This card features the newest Hero Arts window die. This is the Window on the Garden die. Has lots of details to it, and it's great because it makes for a really quick and simple card. So I'm cutting this window on the front of a 4 1/4 by 5.5 inch white top folding note card, and it cuts beautifully. Any kind of open window die would work for this. Now I have another 4 1/4 by 5.5 inch white note card that I have upside down, and I'm going to create my scene on the front panel of that. I wanted to mark here where the top of my flowers would be, so I would know how far to go down with my blue sky. I wanted it to blend down almost to white at the bottom. So that's why you see me applying again the splash and blue Hawaii ink towards the top. After adhering my little tulip field, it's time to add some clouds to the sky. This time I wanted more clouds, so I grabbed the Hero Arts Sea and Sky stamp set, which has some beautiful cloud shapes and actually layering images for clouds. I decided to skip the layering images and just do the solid clouds alone. And I'm arranging those in the sky and once again, stamping them a few times with the Hero Arts white dye ink. And by the way, if you don't have cloud stamps to create a sky like this, you may have a cloud stencil or could hand cut a cloud border to create your own stencil to create clouds in the sky. Okay, so now it's time to adhere the two flaps of our note cards together. So I'm putting adhesive on the inside flap of our scene card, and this will get glued upside down to our window card. We'll fold them together, and there we have our trifold card. Really easy to pull together, and it creates a fun, unique card in no time at all. So I finished off the card by adding a few stamp sentiments and also some birds in the sky. I think this is my favorite of the card designs because doesn't that look like a wonderful vacation in a card? Don't you just want to be there right now? It's so gloomy here. So I thought I'll make more of these using the other panels that I stamped earlier that I haven't shown in this video. By the way, the sentiments that I used here are from a previous Hero Arts My Monthly Hero kit that is no longer available, but you could use any sentiments there underneath the window and on the inside of the card. This is a great card design for getting more out of stamps that you have. You can use different images to create scenes and then add any sentiments you may need. Here's another example using a die that I thought would be fun to use as a window. I feel like the more examples you see of these, the better you'll be able to understand how to make them with whatever products you have. This one features the new Hero Arts greenhouse die. Now this is supposed to be a greenhouse, but I thought I would just stretch it and use it as a window for today's example. I die cut it twice from white cardstock, and I have a 4 1/4 by 5.5 inch top folding white note card. And I will trace the inside of one of these dies onto the top center of this note card. It really doesn't matter how well you trace it, you just need a rough idea of where the inside edge is for the frame of this die cut. So once again, just like I did before, I'm going to cut my own hole in the front of the card, using those pen lines as a guide. I'm going to cut just outside of the pen lines. Now that last card that I did with the fancy window die, that was perfect because it didn't cut a frame. It just cut the window itself. we have to cut this by hand to make the frame die that I have here to work. So I'm just cutting very roughly just outside of that pen line. Once I have that cut, I'm going to adhere that frame die cut over the opening. You could add acetate to this one if you wanted to, but I decided to skip. Sorry my head gets in the way, but I'm putting liquid adhesive just on the inside edge of that messy window that we cut. And I'm laying our first die cut on top, making sure it's straight by using a T-ruler. Once I'm done, I'll take the other die cut and glue that on the inside, just so you don't see my rough cut opening, and it looks nice and clean and finished on the outside and on the inside. Off screen, I took another note card and I created the blue sky on it, and that note card was upside down just like before. Now I'm putting adhesive on the back of our note card and adhering this to the upside down blue note card that we created to create our tri-fold card with the scene on the inside. Next, I can glue our little lavender field that I again die cut out after stamping, and I'll glue that so it peeks through on the front of the window perfectly. Then I'll use my Misty stamping tool to stamp some more onto our little scene here. I did create the clouds with the white dye ink. Now I'm creating a tree from one of the Heroscapes stamp sets. I first stamp it with a dark green ink, then I use a brown pen to color the trunk. And of course, I added the little birds. I feel like those complete the scene nicely. I finished off the card by stamping Sending My Love underneath the window on the front of the card. You can see how the scene shows through the window nicely. And I stamped Thinking of You on the inside, and then it opens up once again, and there's plenty of room to write a message. You can see how any die for the front of that would work. You just need to create the window that allows the scene on the inside to show through. Okay, my last example, I wanted to kind of recreate a window, but I couldn't find my Hero Arts window die, so I decided to kind of make my own using square dies, and it's really easy to do. So I have a Hero Arts Square Infinity die set. This is a new one. I really like the Hero Arts Infinity die sets because so many dies are included and they're the perfect sizing. So I took a square, I think it's 1¼ inches, and I'm going to use that to create the little windows that make up our big window, so kind of like the window panes. So I have a piece of white cardstock here, and I'm starting in one corner. I have my square die, and I'm lining it up in the corner, and then I'll run it through my die cut machine to create our first square. Once I have that cut, I'm going to take one of the white squares that die cut, and I'm going to put a little temporary adhesive on the back of it. And I'll position that right next to our open square there. And by doing this, I can get the positioning just right. So I'm going to put glue on the back, line it up right next to the open square, making sure that the gap around it is similar to the gap on the other side of our square. Then I'll take the square die and pop it right on top, kind of fits like a puzzle. Then I will run that through. And I can be sure that my square is perfectly next to it and lines up nicely. By the way, if you still have a square punch somewhere in your collection, you could use that for this. I just happen to not keep them, so I'm using the square die. Now I'm going to go ahead and trim off that side. You can see how the top of our window is forming. So I'll do the same process. I'll take one of the square die cuts, put some adhesive on the back of it, line it up equally underneath our first square, and then take our die and pop it on top, and then run that through our die cut machine. All I'm doing here is trying to equally space our little squares so we end up with what looks like a nice window in the end. You could eyeball it if you want to, but sometimes it's hard because the square die is actually bigger than the opening. So by first putting down our square die cut, we can get the positioning just right. So I continued to do this until we have the 6 squares and we have what looks like a window. Next, I needed to create the hole on the front of our 4¼ by 5½ inch top folding white note card. And I need the hole to be a little bit bigger than those squares that we just die cut. So instead of doing what I did before where I traced it and then cut it, I just thought I would save time by using a Hero Arts rectangle die that is just a little bit bigger than the area that we have those squares. So I'm taking the rectangle die, lining it up on the front of our note card. I'll run it through our die cut machine. Then I realized my rectangle isn't tall enough to be a window for the little window that we created, so I just shifted the rectangle die down a little bit and I ran it through again. So here you'll see I'll take the rectangle die and I'll line it up with the sides of the rectangle hole that we already have, but shift it down a bit so it'll cut a little bit more off of the bottom. In the end, it might have been just as fast to have traced the inside of those squares and hand cut my little window, but this way I don't have to have something on the inside to cover up my jagged edges. So now I have this rectangle opening that's just right for the window that we created with our square dies. I decided to use acetate behind this one, so I put double-sided tape on the back of our little window that we created here. And then I glued it on to a piece of acetate, and I'm trimming the excess around. So what I'll end up with is a window with acetate panes on it. I then put adhesive on the back of that, and I'm gluing it right onto the front of our card. You can kind of see through on the inside, but I feel like it looks clean enough, so I'm going to leave it as is. So I have a top folding white note card that's upside down here, where I created the blue sky on it like before. And I'm gluing it to the inside of our window card. So once again, we have a tri-fold card. I can glue a little sunflower field image right there at the bottom of our sky. I decided to go out on a limb and create pink sunflowers. So this I created with Hero Art's bubblegum pink ink and ultra pink ink. So we have pink sunflowers. I just thought it'd be fun to do something a little bit different. So here's the completed card. I did add a sentiment strip panel down at the bottom of the window. I just felt like it gave it a nice finished look. And I also added some hot air balloons and some birds and clouds to the inside of our little scene there. It's a very simple card design and a fun way to take your square dies and use them creatively to create what looks like a window. Now before we go, I had one more stamp set that I really wanted to use to create a window scene. I really thought it'd be perfect, but I ran out of time. This is the Hero Arts At the Lake stamp set. It creates a beautiful lake scene with mountains and trees. I've actually used this in a video before, and I'll link to it here if you want to check it out, but I thought it would be excellent for this window scene card if you wanted to try it out. Okay, so there you have a bunch of ways of creating these fun tri-fold cards. If you wanted to check out any of these products, they're linked below in my YouTube description. You can also go to my blog where I always have a lot more to offer. In the middle are a couple other videos that I think you might find of interest and are great for scene cards like these. Thanks for watching. I hope you'll return again soon and have a wonderful week.